questions? So, as always, nice and gently and easily. Look at the chair. You don't really want to see my chair, do you? Feet about hip width apart. Make sure you've got a little bit of room around you, but as always, we'll keep it fairly simple and straightforward. And just sink a little bit in your hips. Turn from the center of your body. So this is a very typical opening. I think it's easy to overlook this particular exercise. Just will think, oh, just swing my arms around, but there's a great deal going on. And it gives us a chance to focus our attention and to just think about some of the basic ideas while our body's just getting into the sort of swing of things. So feet directly below your hips. Try and have a feeling of your weight being slightly forward. So some of you may feel comfortable with your weight right behind the ball of each foot. But if that isn't really working for you, then the thing to avoid is a sort of slumping back into your heels. It's you want to feel as though you're about to sort of take a step. About to take a step. You don't actually take the step. So it's a slightly sort of energetic posture. And to counter the feeling of being pulled forwards, we want to just, if I'm like this is exaggerated, I just let my hips drop back. And I notice as I do that my knees are still in line with my toes, still roughly over the balls of my feet. So I haven't done this. We call it sitting. And it sometimes reminds me of the sort of feeling that you get if you're out for a walk and you decide to take a rest and you just perch on the edge of a fence or something like that. It's just that just letting the weight out of the upper part of your body. So this is really the rooting down. When we go down deeper, we're toning the body better. Perhaps getting a bit more of a root, but this is the position that ultimately we want to feel is comfortable for us. And it allows for releasing of tightness, of stiffness from the upper part of your body. A looser feeling in your hips, eventually your shoulders. Just thinking about the quality of the movement that you're making. This isn't something that I always emphasize in Tai Chi because it really grows out of the posture. But it doesn't hurt to sort of get this sense of a smooth movement. It's sometimes described as a massaging quality. I think it's important that we don't lose sight of that. Sometimes we're focusing on very precise movements, and exactly where the hands are, and so on and so forth, and that helps with the quality of the movement. But there is something special about the quality of the movement in Tai Chi, I think, and perhaps particularly at the moment with quite sort of anxious times, and a lot going on around us in lots of ways. Sorry, my feet don't seem to be like that. That's better. And there's quite a lot of evidence out there in studies that have been done on things like Tai Chi and calming methods and massage and so on and so forth. But this kind of movement, this kind of practice does have a very calming effect on the nervous system. And so long term, it can even help with health problems like anxiety and so on and so forth, all of which I think are becoming quite endemic in our society at the moment. And we're all subject to that, whether we directly feel it or not. So the smoothness of the movement, the flow of the movement can be very important. And if we also train ourselves to move as though we're moving through water, although there's a sense of resistance there. That will help with that flow. Because the flow is partly down to the sense of connection in the body. Think about how a cat moves. We're told sometimes in Tai Chi, walk like a cat. And when cats move, they move as one unit. And so that sense of resistance in the air around us, if we can imagine that and move with that, actually helps to build the continuity, the flow of the movement. So these are all useful things to focus our attention on right at the start. And as we become more familiar with them, and as we practice these things, we find that we slip into them more easily. So there's a sense in which you're reminding yourself of these things. And of course, the knock-on effect from that can be in our everyday life, that just remembering that the possibility of moving in that way will actually trigger the movement. Now just turn your hands out, raise them up a little. Palms of your hands facing up and your fingers spread out. Let us come a bit close. So you can see the hand position that I've got there. Because I've got a ball resting in my hand. You see the thumb is slightly curled in. The fingers are slightly curved. It's not holding in on itself, but not tight and not stiff. So as you're doing this, you just imagine you've got a tennis ball in the palm of each hand. And then just let your hands drop. So still feet hip width apart. Have your toes pointing forwards or very slightly turned out if that's more comfortable for you. And just rolling your weight forwards and backwards in your feet. I'll exaggerate this. Bear in mind that with a lot of these movements, I do exaggerate them. They're not very subtle movements, but you wouldn't see anything happening. So if I start to do this, I mean, I'm going too far, my heels and my toes are coming off the ground, but you can see what's happening. There's an automatic response on the part of my body, jerks a little. So if I go too far, I stiffen up and I lose that quality of movement. So first of all, we want to get a sense for how far we can move without that actually happening. And that will roughly be between the ball and the front part of your heel on each foot. It varies a little bit from person to person. And then gradually see if you can identify what I think of as a midpoint, a balance point, where rather than any sense of being pulled forwards or backwards, it feels neutral. And the overall effect is to draw you down into your feet. The pull of gravity draws you down into your feet. And then once again, we might want to think about moving the weight slightly forwards to allow the hips to drop back. So feeling of draining away, dissolving of tension, stiffness in the upper part of your body. But also a stronger feeling, a more supportive feeling in your legs and deeper in your body, almost like there's a column going up through the middle of your body, holding you up. I sometimes think it's a bit like a tent, when a tent's got a framework and then it's got the guy ropes and the skin of the tent pinned out and so on and so forth. Never tight, never rigid, but always with a certain amount of pull on them and So that allows for the tent to kind of sway a little bit, and so on and so forth. And this is what we're trying to sustain and to maintain through all of the exercising. Then let your hips drop back a little bit more. Be careful with your knees. You'll feel it very strong in the thigh muscles. And eventually, you'll just be pushed up. And then you sink down and push up. So again, I want to avoid doing this. I want to avoid doing this. Just go down as far as you're comfortable. This is not a competition to see who can bend their knees the furthest. But you want to get this sense of every now and then, it's almost like if you were trying to push a stick into the ground, you might every now and then kind of get it down a little bit further. Your legs straighten a little bit, they push your hips up, your hips push your shoulders up. Bring your hands around in front of you, as though you're cradling the ball. Push up. The body expands, pushing your elbows out. Turn them over so they're draped over the ball. And sink it down. So to start off with, the focus of our attention should be on sinking, rooting. The rhythm of the movement, expanding and contracting, is nice and even, so that helps with the flow, the quality of the movement that I was referring to earlier. Try and have your hands quite close to your body. You see, for this one. Going back to this sort of regular flow, this steady massaging quality, see how it feels next time you push up, just to take a gentle breath in. And just let yourself breathe out as you sink down. And don't feel that you should be doing that the whole time. I'm not a fan of rigidly keeping to a breathing pattern. But gradually your breath will harmonize with the movement and with the quality of the movement as well. You might just want to refer back to that every now and then. And then hands coming out to your sides, and wild goose. Of course, the various images that we use are often in themselves things that carry a quality of movement, of calmness with them. Soothing is perhaps an interesting word to consider, an idea to consider, that there is something quite soothing about the whole of this practice. Wild goose. One more time. And then, excuse me, hands dropping all the way down, crossing in front of your belly. Same rhythm, a little bit more expansive, just parting the clouds. Still pushing up from the ground. In fact, as you get more familiar with the movements, you'll find that this thing of sort of sinking downwards and then pushing up really creates the rhythm in the body. It just becomes a natural thing to do. Like you're sort of bouncing up and down on a trampoline or a bouncy castle. Let's do one more. And after this one, we'll go back to the first of these and string them together into a little sequence of 3 movements. So just bringing your hands around in front of you and then gently push up. Take your time, don't rush. Wait until you finished one movement, then bring your hands out, going into the wild goose. This is not a race. And if this is fairly new to you, well, even if it's not, you may just feel a slight sense of panic almost. Are you doing it right? Are you going to forget the movement? And just remind yourself, this is not going to be the end of the world if you lose where you are in the sequence. Just pick it up again. Doesn't mean that you're a failure at this art. So I have literally seen Chinese grandmasters make mistakes, which is quite encouraging. But what we do focus on when we do a little sequence like this particularly is that there's a point of change. So we bring our hands down and then it's almost like there's a pause as we come into position for the next one. We finish this and our hands go out for the wild goose. Not quite the movement stopping, but kind of slowing down almost. And so another element that I think is very important in Tai Chi and relates to this soothing quality, I think, is this still quality that underlies the movement. At first that seems like a contradiction, but eventually we recognize that the two are interdependent. So this time we'll move on to the dragon plucking the stars from the sky. Just on one side, expanding, and then this winding movement like you're plucking an apple off a tree. Yeah, looking forward to it. See that a bit better. Then change sides. And again, don't do this abruptly. Let your hand come all the way down, fingers open and point down towards the foot. Then your attention slides across like a camera panning across a landscape. Nice and easy and gentle. Hi, this is Michael from Cambridge 503390. Thanks for your call. I can't take it. So again, a nice steady movement, a nice smooth movement. If you need to rest, and rest, obviously. All those really important qualities that I'm talking about get lost if we start to strain. So if your legs are really aching, stop for a moment, give them a little shake. And then both hands together. Trying to keep the focus of your attention, and for people less familiar with the movements, in some ways that's slightly easier. Just doing the 2 movements for a moment, don't do the turn. Because you're thinking, oh, what's he going to do next? If you're familiar with the movements, it's more difficult to maintain that focus of attention. But that still quality really does come out of the focusing of your attention, the quietening of your thoughts stepping back from your thoughts. That's a better way of thinking of it. Again, this one, the hands aren't too far from your body, just a little bit above your head, and staying in front of your body. There's often a tendency to do this, but you want to keep them in front. Just slightly. Your hands push out from the center of your body, and then they draw back. So gradually, a strong focus for your attention is that area between hips and waist, the center of your body, sometimes referred to as the lower dantian. And this time, when you push out, you turn from that area, again, hips and waist, so that draws your arms around and back. And the other way, think of that center part of your body as being like the hub of a wheel. Your arms as being like spokes. So when you move in the hub, the arms follow. And yet at the same time, the hub has a sort of still quality about it, doesn't it? Things move around the hub. Expand in and contract. Don't turn too far. You'll lose that smoothness of movement and that massaging quality if you go beyond a certain point. And I think it's reasonable to expect that boundary to expand, but we don't want to cross it at any point. So you want to get used to how far you can move, maintaining this quality of movement. And all the other elements that come together in Tai Chi. Remember, so you're moving through water, so you're very actively pushing out here. Let's do one more round of this one. So I think it, again, encapsulates much of what we look for in Tai Chi. We expand out, but we always come all the way back, give ourselves time to do that. Expanding out again, not rushing, coming back to this sense of awareness of the center. And then finally facing forwards and pushing out. Now, let your hands drop down on one side. Just draw your fingers back and feel the expansion through that side of your body until your hand springs up and it's almost in line with your nose, and then it comes down the front to here. And again. And if this is comfortable for you, then next time we can add a movement in. You just turn again in the center of your body, and that brings you to an angle. It's not pulling your arm across though. So the movement starts, eventually you'll find that as your shoulder opens up at the back, your arm will come across a bit further. But be careful with this because it's quite strong on your back, and you want to avoid twisting your spine or your shoulder. So give yourself time for this. Switch sides. Notice any difference between one side and another. expanding, contracting. And again, particularly people more experienced, make a point of really taking notice of these movements. Don't just take them for granted. There's often something new that will crop up or that you'll notice. And then, if it's comfortable, you add the turn. So we notice more and more subtle changes and patterns of movement within the body. And this is part of the mind training of the art. Now, letting your hands drop down, go back to this movement, sinking down and pushing up. As we do this, you may not notice it to start off with, but there's slight changes here in the pelvis. If I stop that happening, if I tighten my back and I start to go down, I fall over. So what effectively happens, again, I'm exaggerated, this combines with this natural tucking under. You don't have to make it happen. And that keeps us upright. So try and just soften a little bit in your lower back as you sink down. But this time, what I want you to do next time, we can get around saying, push up, and then as you go down, deliberately tilt your pelvis a little bit forward. Notice how that brings your head forward. But when you get to about this position, just let gravity pull on your hips and bring you back to the upright position. Then push up. So don't strain in your shoulders or your back to come upright. You can see, again, if I exaggerate, it's almost like a kind of floppy movement, and eventually I just arrive at the upright position. Don't let your head hang down in the way that I did there. That was very exaggerated. But yeah. Be careful of your knees. Be careful of your back. This is rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Your hands get pushed up and then swung forward. And once again, letting your hips drop. And just a moment of settling, slotting into place almost, and then you start again. So we feel how we no longer need to stiffen, to strain, just to get that nice, open, upright quality. Again, observing the movement to whatever sort of level of subtlety is appropriate for you. And hopefully that's something that increases for us over time. It's as much about training our minds as it is training our body. Do one more. And then back to the upright. All of these elements are part of the whole construct of Tai Chi that gives us this still, quiet, flowing quality. In sit and meditation traditions, that very deep focusing of your attention, I'm trying to avoid the word concentration because I think concentration is not a useful term, but that gathering in of your thoughts and that focusing of your thoughts to a very subtle level is something that is seen as being a generator of conditions of real deep calmness. So all of these things, the attention that we pay, the mind training element, the flow of the movement, the imagery that we use to help develop the flow, the awareness of posture, and so on and so forth, all are all essential building blocks in the overall approach to Tai Chi, which is one of the reasons why I try and steer people away too much from the flow of the movement, because we need these building blocks, but it's never with the intent of denying the importance of the flow, whether that be just the feeling of moving with a sense of smoothness, or again, as we develop more, a sense of movement within the body, this idea of a momentum and energy flowing within the body. They're all part and parcel of the whole picture. Now, an exercise we started to look at last week, and it's the stretching between heaven and earth. And as I said last week, it works in stages. I don't like the idea of levels, but go to whichever stage is comfortable for you. You can build up to the rest. It ends up with us standing on one foot. We know that, but you don't have to do that today. So to start off with your hands in front of you, I suggest you mirror my movements. So push your right hand up and your left hand down. And you see they're slightly diagonal. It's as though somebody's just separated my shoulder from my hip. And you feel that particularly across your back, your hands are in front of your body. And then you bring your hands down and they slide past each other in front of your belly and you push up. That's called stretching between heaven and earth. And you can feel that opening around the lower abdomen. It's a movement that is sometimes connected with stomach and digestion. Stretching is perhaps overstating it. It should be a sense of opening rather than a stiff stretch. Again, that nice steady rhythm and the feeling of expansion from the center of your body upwards, sideways, and downwards. Then a contraction back in. So now, if it's comfortable for you this time, as you reach out, move your weight across. I've exaggerated a bit, so I've gone slightly out of line. It's only about 60% normally. And then back to the center, over into your left leg. Remember, your hands are in front of your body. And be particularly aware that with the top hand in particular, there's a tendency to kind of pull back. And although you're reaching up, I want you to feel very much as though you're sinking down in that leg that you've just moved towards. So this is one additional stage you can make to the original exercise. Then this time, as you go across the empty leg, the leg that's not carrying so much of the weight, you just push the knee forwards and raise the heel. Again, I've exaggerated that a bit. And across, I'll show you from the side. See how my hip rotates and pushes my knee forwards, and that starts to raise my foot. So we're starting to move to lift the foot without losing that alignment of the pelvis. If you remember in the previous exercise, rowing the boat, and the pelvis is level and more upright. So what we don't want to do to raise the heel is something like this. As you can see, I'm already going out of line. The next stage, if you want to think of it like that, would be to just flex your foot and to raise your toes. So you raise the heel, you raise the toes, and you bring the foot in. Just put the toes down, step out again. You can either put the ball of the foot down first or the heel, whichever is more comfortable. Move across, pressing the hands together, settle into your left foot, raise the heel and the toes, and step in. So you'll notice that my feet are turned out slightly now. Most people find it slightly easier to get the weight into the foot if they do that. Because it creates a bit of space in the hip. So then, again, if you're comfortable with this, you get to here, and again, you rotate the hip and bring the knee up a bit higher. As you lower the foot down, hold the ball, step out, move across, pressing the hands together, raising the right heel, bring the foot in, push up, step out. Maybe just sinking down a little bit here. Be careful of your legs though, be careful of your knees. So stretching between heaven and earth. Think of your pelvis as being like a bowl of water. You don't want it to spill. And again, this is not a competition in standing on one leg. As most of you heard me say before, I'm not a big fan really of standing on one leg. So don't lose the flow of the movement. If you find that you are, go back to this, focus on settling down in the leg, keeping your body aligned. And in time, you'll find that raising your foot just becomes a lot more sort of natural. So, again, it's not a competition. One more on each side. And shake out, stretching between heaven and earth. So if we concentrate on alignment, on posture, and on rooting down, we maintain the flow of the movement, and eventually we find that we're able to maintain that flow and that quietness and that stillness in slightly more challenging positions. As I said, I'm not a fan of standing on one leg. I don't see it as being a particularly practical thing to do. It can be an indicator, I suppose, of balance, but you know, you don't go to the supermarket and bump into somebody and say, "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" and stand like that. That's not. Well, you don't do it at all at the moment, but you know what I mean. You know, don't see that raising the leg as the be all and end all to that. It's challenging. It can be quite challenging. Think about the method of doing this. Some of you may have watched some stuff I put up on YouTube about this, but you know, things like we build it in stages 1 and 2. You see what I'm doing there? I raise my heel by pushing the knee forwards, not by lifting the hip. And then all I have to do is flex the foot. I'm standing on one leg. And then if I want to raise the foot more, I rotate the hip. None of those actions involve any kind of leaning over or leaning back or anything like that, because that's when you start to lose the alignment of the body. Now put one foot forwards. Keep the width of your step about the same in length, and let your hips drop back and transferring the weight from front to back. To begin with, you start to get something like 60% of your weight in the front foot, maybe 70% when you go into the back foot. The knee should not straighten. It's not that. It doesn't do that. In fact, you can see as soon as that happens, it's kind of pushing my posture out. Soften your knees though. Again, if you haven't done this for a while or you're not that practiced in this, you will find that the big muscles of the legs get fatigued. When that happens, it's important to rest them because you won't be able to use them properly. Keep practicing and they'll get stronger. Now we're going to apply the same idea of moving the foot that we just did in stretching between heaven and earth. So when you go back, you settle into the back foot, you raise the toes, and you find that you sort of drop back a little bit more. Turn the front foot out slightly. When you go forwards, like before, you let the knee bend, and can you see how that's just I kind of drop a bit more? You really need to be careful you don't sort of stumble forwards there. It's just a slight drop forwards, and gradually more of your weight fills into the supporting legs. So the back foot, you go from 70 to 75 to 80 and so on and so forth. And just keep doing that with this feeling of your weight draining down through the leg till almost all the weight of the body just for a moment is on that leg and is going through that leg and that foot. And that's when, again, you can just move the foot a little bit, bring the foot in without having to strain. Those of you who've been doing this for a while, I don't want you to strain, but I do want you to imagine that your foot is stuck in mud. You don't want to lean. If you've ever walked across a muddy field, then a really bad idea if your back foot is stuck in the mud is to do this, because you'll go flat down in the mud. So it's a contraction in the leg between your ankle and your hip. And this just encourages you to make it a slightly stronger movement for the leg. If you're fairly new to this, don't bother with that yet. I'm just throwing something in for people with a bit more experience. When you step, you put the heel down, lower the toes, move the weight. When you go back, same idea, but you put the ball of the foot down first, then the heel. And you push in a little bit. Imagine you're walking on thin ice. And what you're going to do is you just put the foot down, you just test the ice. Is it going to take your weight before you commit your weight? So you have a good contact with the ground. Shake out. Now, on the other side, same thing. First of all, just transferring your weight, using your legs to propel your body. So to start off with, your upper body just sits on your hips. Make sure you're not stiffening your knees. Remember, all the joints of the body really represent the spaces between the bones. So they shouldn't be tight and stiff. It's the muscles around the joints that is where the strength of the joint lies. Muscle, tendon, ligament, that kind of thing. And then just raising your toes and your heel, same thing. This rhythm of expansion and contraction we feel in lots of ways in the body. So for instance, when you go to step in, your leg contracts. and expands. Remember, just test the ground. If the idea of walking on a thin ice isn't appealing, then imagine walking on soft sand. And what you're going to do is you just push down a little bit to find that slightly firmer base underneath, or on a spongy lawn or something like that. Now, depending on where you've got space, either go forwards or backwards, take a few steps. You can put your toes down in between just to stabilize yourself. And then go in the other direction. And bring your feet back. Shake it. Good. So, now 1 foot forwards again. And use this sliding movement, this transfer of the weight, to move our arms through. So start with your weight in your back foot, hold your hands over your belly. Pigeon spreads its wings. So just watch for the first one, even if you feel you notice. Notice how as I go forward, it's like there's a ball expanding behind my hands. And that comes from the back leg. And as I sink into the front leg, my arms just open up. So I'm not doing this. It's an unfolding of the body. So starting in your back foot, pigeon spreads its wings. Sometimes I get this sort of image occurs to me with movements like this. It's almost like if you could imagine watching a flower open up in a time-lapse film. That sense of the whole of the upper body opening, rib cage, shoulders, blades as you go back, and so on and so forth. Pigeon spreads its wings. Again, if it helps you to follow a breathing pattern, or if you just want to try it out every now and then, do an in-breath as you go forwards. And then this time, sink back, let your hands drop down, and just rotate them outwards so they get drawn back just slightly. And imagine a curved line going forward. So as you go forward, you rotate your arms. And again, just feeling the effect on rib cage and the upper part of your back. Maybe eventually you would want to feel not just the ribs in the back, but further down in the body and the sides. So feeling the movements that connect, that energy coming from your legs, the movement of your weight with your arms moving. And then, once again, changing, this time, fisherman cast the net. Hands just very slightly behind the body before they get pulled forwards. and then sinking back, and let your elbows come out a little bit, wrist drop down in front of your hips, and then pushing a wave or pushing a boat. Don't let your hands go too far forwards. Remember, there's the strength, the movement coming from your legs. There's all these subtle changes in the upper part of your body. If all of that isn't strong enough to make the push, then your arms aren't going to make any difference. But now what we do, let your hands come down. We're going to string those last three movements together. So start with this curving movement. And again, there's a sort of sense of just gathering in, collecting yourself before you go into the next movement. Now, fisherman cast the net. And then pushing away. And again, as you become more familiar with these movements, doing them in a sequence means you can just feel the very subtle changes within your body. Each movement has its own particular resonance, pattern of movement, an echo of movement within your body. And so stringing the movements together like this draws our attention. And again, we get that really deep sense of gathering our thoughts. It's never the end of the world if you do a different movement in the sequence. It's not. We're not awarding prizes for perfect form or anything. It's the last one. So do those same movements with the other foot forwards. We'll start with pigeon spreads its wings again. Imagine the ball expanding behind your arms, like a balloon being blown up. And then back. Remind yourself of those really basic elements. The flow of the movement, the rhythm, that quality of stillness, which we find if we bring our attention back to our center, we follow the movement back to the center and back to the ground. We just touch base with that. Sense of space within your body. And then just changing, winding your hands out. I still don't have a name for this movement, I'm afraid. I find it fascinating nevertheless. And then fisherman cast the net. And all of the movements and all that's involved in them, the focusing of our attention, the quality of the movement, should have this soothing, calming quality underlying them. and then pushing a wave or pushing the boat, but stronger feeling starting to make itself felt, almost like that stronger feeling in our legs, and described it as like a column going up through your body, gradually expanding through the rest of your body. And then just the sequence of 3 a few times, just for this curving movement. Let's do one more round. Good, and bring your feet down. Lovely, just drop your hands together. This is another good exercise for that kind of releasing of tension and stress. Although it's done faster, just a really soft movement, almost like rain, just falling on your face very gently. And then over your top of your head and down to your neck. Down to one shoulder, your arm. The other side. Punch your back. Around your hips. Your legs. Light on your belly. And the upper part of your chest. I remember many years ago when I started Tai Chi in 1983, something my first teacher often used to say to us is that we would find ourselves standing like this started dropping back, when we were standing in the supermarket queues, which I must admit at the time I thought was unlikely given the way my legs were aching and shaking, until the day when indeed I found myself literally standing in the supermarket queue, feeling slightly agitated by it, and just found myself slipping in. The postures become a reminder that there is this quality of stillness of body and of mind that we can get just by drawing our attention in for a few moments. Nobody's going to keep that the whole time, but the very rhythm of the Tai Chi is a movement outwards, and as we move outwards, we're quite likely to encounter things that stress us. Just as in moving the arms out, they're more likely to tighten up. But Tai Chi has this rhythm that always brings us back to that sense of being centered, of touching base, if you like, finding that stillness. So I think, you know, one of the things I've always taken from the practice is that it gives me the tools to not that I never get stressed or annoyed or anything like that, but to draw back from that, to find that quality of stillness. But for me, it's such a key value of the art. So the last exercise that we do, Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain, really encapsulates that idea. The tiger is an image of daily life, really, I suppose. They're wild and energetic and a bit unpredictable, possibly a bit dangerous. The mountain is the quietness, the stillness, however you care to think about it. So sinking down and then pushing up and around, and drawing in, and just see what it is that draws you back to the mountain. It might be an idea, an image, it might be an awareness of the rhythm, it could be put gravity on your hips, it might be that you're taking an out breath here, whatever. It's a very personal thing. What is the thing you would want to remember when you're standing in the supermarket queue, or when the tiger seems to be going wild around you? What will bring you back? One more time. And just take a couple of slow, gentle breaths in the standing position. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope that was useful to you.
Thank you, Mark.
Always feel free to